I'm Will.
Hey, Will.
I'm going to talk to you guys about some stuff. Mushroom stuff. Yeah. So how many of you guys are familiar with any of my work prior to this? Cool. So yeah. I'm here to talk to you guys about North American Cordyceps farms, Cordyceps cultivation, how everything's looking right now. A little bit about me. My name is William Padilla Brown. I live in Asheville, North Carolina. I used to live in central Pennsylvania where I started Mycelium in 2015. Prior to that, I'm just a self-educated dude, dropped out of high school, started learning about this kind of stuff, and got really interested in permaculture. I realized like not a lot of people in the area that I was living in Pennsylvania knew a lot about fungus as far as like the permaculture community. So I wanted to kind of bridge the gap. Like a lot of teenagers, I played around with mushrooms and grew some funny ones, and I realized with that knowledge that I knew more than the people around me knew about fungus. So I just took that knowledge and started cultivating gourmet and medicinal mushrooms and started teaching about it. So around 2014, 2015, I started leading classes in central Pennsylvania, and it really developed from there. In 2015, I hosted my first Mycosymbiotics Mushroom Arts Festival, which just happened last weekend, the fourth one. At that first festival, Charlie that was just here, he found a Cordyceps mushroom at the end of the festival, and I took that mushroom, and that began my Cordy quest. So, I think I better go ahead here. So yeah, you guys are now joining me on my Cordy quest. I know it's a little bit hard to see the presentation, but we'll do our best. On the left, we have Atolypocladium ophiogosoides. Has anybody ever seen these? The black cordyceps that grows on deer truffles? No? So there's a black truffle. We call it a golden thread because any of the parts that haven't been exposed to oxygen stay like this really nice orange color. And they grow on false truffles or deer truffles, typically Elaphomyces granulus, but they'll grow on Elaphomyces genus truffles. So they parasitize the truffle, they grow out of it. And the only reason that I've included this in my talk is because I've been able to cultivate this mushroom with the same methods that I utilize to cultivate Cordyceps militaris, which I'll kind of go over as we go through this talk. And the really cool thing when you grow these in culture, if you grow them in a container, because there's not as much oxygen, the whole mushroom will stay orange, which is really cool. But on the right, we have the first Cordyceps that I ever came in contact with, first wild one, which was the Cordyceps militaris that Charlie found at my first annual Mycosymbiotics Mushroom Arts Festival. And that's kind of what started all of this. So back then, I didn't know really anything about Cordyceps besides that they were medicinal. Whenever I took this culture home, I did as much research as I could to see if anybody had been cultivating them, and I found out that a lot of people have been cultivating them in southern Asia, mostly Thailand, Korea, Vietnam, and China, southern China. So I knew if somebody was cultivating it somewhere, then we could do it. Just at that point, there was no English literature on cultivating Cordyceps mushrooms. So kind of like, how many of you guys are familiar with open source? So the open source movement, basically somebody comes up with an idea and then they share it all over the internet so that people can collaborate and advance the idea further. So if I like made a new device, I'll put it out for everybody to see, and then there's going to be a lot of nerds that just like make upgrades to the device, and then everybody can collaborate, and then the technology advances really quick. So I knew that I wasn't going to be able to figure out how to do this all by myself, so I sent it out to as many people as I could. Charlie was very helpful in the mix. That's where he got his nickname Charliceps back then. Ryan Paul Gates from Terrestrial Fungi in Warren, Michigan was also a very big help. He was actually the first one that got fruit bodies off of the culture that I got, and after that we started just rocking out and figuring out the best cultivation method. So Ryan sent back translated substrate recipes as well for us to start utilizing from Thailand. You can see, I don't know if you can see, but can you guys see this pretty good? As good as you probably can. It's growing from a pupa. So typically we'll find Cordyceps militaris on the Lepidopteran pupa, but Cordyceps militaris is one of the most successful Cordyceps mushrooms because it can grow on 32 different species of insects, whereas most Cordyceps is only associated with one. Like Atolypocladium, it's associated with the Elaphomyces truffles, and most other Cordyceps are only associated with one insect. So Cordyceps militaris is very successful as far as that goes. And just this year, I started the Cordyceps, culture collection. I think that's what I called it. It's like CCC or something like that. For people to that are finding cordyceps to send them into me so I can get more cultures going, because one of the things that was happening as I've been cultivating them for a little over 3 years now is that I would get my cultures around this time of year because this is when they're fruiting out in the wild, and then typically by July the following year my cultures would start dying off and not being able to produce fruits anymore. So cordyceps cultures senesce very quickly, and what I was doing over this past couple of years is actually propagating spore cultures, but I would only have like 1 or 2 strains from the wild, so I was basically inbreeding the cordyceps all year. And just like humans, if you inbreed like even once or twice, you'll get like mental retardation and stuff like that. So you'll get like really wonky cordyceps that don't fruit right, or sometimes they won't produce any spore-bearing bodies. And as far as the cordyceps mushroom goes, specifically with the militaris, the structure that we see, it's technically called stromata, and on the top there's these little bumps called perithecium. And the perithecium are the actual fruit body of the mushroom. The stromata is more of like a tissue for the fruiting to happen, to get it out of the ground. So Cordyceps militaris, they're in the kingdom fungi, as we all know, that's why we're here. They're an ascomycete, so they produce their spores in ascus. The ascus are actually located inside of the perithecium. Typically will contain about 4 to 8 spores. The spores on Cordyceps militaris are actually straight. They're not like circular spores or oval spores. And I have some microscopic pictures of them for you guys to see. They're in the family Cordycepitaceae, which not all cordyceps are in the family Cordycepitaceae. There's also Ophiocordycepitaceae. And one of the really cool things that I like to utilize for marketing is that Cordyceps militaris are actually in the genus Cordyceps, whereas the traditional Cordyceps from Tibet is the Ophiocordyceps sinensis, so it's not a true Cordyceps genus mushroom. This Cordyceps here, that was found at the 2nd annual Mycosymbiotics Mushroom Noise Festival. So the first 2 years we found wild Cordyceps in the general area of the festival location. So the first time I did the festival, it was in Duncannon, Pennsylvania. We found Cordyceps on that property. Second year I did the mushroom festival in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, in the Michaud State Forest, and that's where we've got the most of our cultures from. A lot of people find Cordyceps every single year in the Michaud State Forest. Like, you can find a fair amount of them. Yeah, so that one was one of the specimens found at the 2nd year, and then these past 2 years we haven't found them. So last year I did it in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and this year I did it in Tamako, Pennsylvania. We didn't find Cordyceps there. But people have been finding Cordyceps all over Pennsylvania and actually all over the country over the past couple months, and then sending them in to me, which is really cool because I was telling you guys about that inbreeding thing. Now I have Cordyceps from Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, New York, Pennsylvania, and a couple more coming in from more western states, and that's really cool because I can mix those genetics together to create more viable strains, and also create strains that might not have ever existed because it was almost impossible for the spores to connect with each other. And this picture might be hard for you guys to see, but if you can see, like, there's some white stuff right here. Can you guys see that? Yeah. So the perithecium bumps, those are where the spores are produced inside of the ascus, inside of those perithecium, and then the spores shoot out as straight lines. My friend Alan Rockefeller had a really good video on his YouTube account of Cordyceps spores being ejected, and I think you might be able to find it somewhere else online. But his YouTube account got deleted. And a lot of mushroom people's YouTube accounts, like my own, have been like, people have been flagging my videos, and I've had to like send emails back and forth to YouTube to get my videos back up. And the same things happen with like a lot of like cannabis growers and stuff like that. YouTube's like coming down on like inappropriate content, I guess. But I only put like educational, like gourmet and medicinal mushroom stuff, and they were still coming at me. But Alan did have like psilocybin mushroom stuff on his YouTube, so I don't know if he's gonna put it back up, but just little weird tidbits about stuff's going on. So yeah, the Cordyceps militaris complex, like just talked about Alan, he's the one that informed me that there is actually a complex of Cordyceps militaris, 4 different species that are macroscopically identical. So whenever we look at them, it'll all look like Cordyceps militaris. But we have the pseudo-militaris, which basically means like fake militaris. We have the rosio stromata, which the color of the stromata is actually a little bit different. And we have the Cordyceps cardinalis. I think it would be really cool, like working with people like Craig, who's going to be giving a talk tomorrow, that can do genetic barcoding of the cordyceps, that we can be able to find out what's the true species that we have. Because as I was saying, I've got these specimens from all over the country sent to me this year, and we've seen cordyceps. I have Cordyceps militaris that were growing off 3 different pupae hosts. So they're definitely growing on different insects. So it'd be cool to see if we have any different strains, because then we can market it differently. I could just be like, you can buy this Cordyceps militaris, you can buy this Rosio stromata, cardinalis, so on and so forth. And then also, I believe it's very important to start doing analyzation with gas and liquid spectrometry to see what's the levels of the compounds that we have in it. So a lot of my focus is on just like do-it-yourself, low-tech. I think community labs are very important. Just kind of like gyms, you go and get a membership, but instead you just get your brain gains on instead of like getting your muscle gains. Well, your brain is a big old muscle, so you just get your brain gains on and then work with other nerds to just develop more access to equipment and just learn faster. So there's Craig right there, as I was just talking about.
Hello, everyone. Hey, Craig.
So yeah, just keeping that like DIY mindset. I went out and I purchased a polymerase chain reaction machine. Thermocycler, yeah. And all the other accoutrements necessary for doing DNA barcoding in my house. I figured if I taught myself biology, mycology, I could teach myself molecular biology. So just working with friends and working back and forth to figure out how to do this kind of stuff at home. And the equipment is becoming more accessible as they upgrade the equipment a lot. So in like laboratories and like universities and stuff like that, they will be getting rid of equipment and putting it on auction and stuff like that. So if we can get gas and liquid spectrometry machines available in community laboratories, that'd be great. And then a little bit later, I'll talk to you about how we can go about utilizing them and making it cost effective. If anybody has questions as I'm going, feel free to ask. So yeah, we're going to the life cycle of Cordyceps militaris. We have this awesome picture here, and this is from 1837. So people have been looking at cordyceps for a long time. Just imagine you don't have a phone, you don't have a television, you're probably going to be going outside and looking at the weirdest stuff you can find. So that's what people were doing. They find these crazy cordyceps, and then they have microscopes back then and telescopes. So you can see that they have a nice cross section here, and it actually shows the parathecium cups. If you were to go further in with the microscope, you'd be able to see the ascus, or the SI, inside of the parathecium. So it's a really good picture here of the cordyceps mushroom. So cordyceps are really, really wild. Like we have, as our country is becoming more liberal, more people are coming out about their sexual orientation, just not being just male or female, maybe being non-binary and so on and so forth. But mushrooms have been doing this forever. There's nobody judging them, so they're just free to be whatever sex they want to be. Cordyceps are some of the only bipolar heterothallic organisms on the planet. And what this means basically, every one of you guys, or every one of the girls in here, there's probably only one girl that I'd be able to have a baby with that would be fertile and could have more babies. And there may be like one other girl in here that I could have a baby with, but it won't be able to make more babies. So like that's what happens with cordyceps spores. You put a bunch of spores on a plate, and there's only like a couple out of like thousands of spores that can actually make fertile offspring, and then some of them can make offspring that won't be able to reproduce. So really crazy. And then cordyceps can also morph. Did anybody read like the Animorph books when they were little? Yeah. So like cordyceps can like morph into a whole different species. It'd be like us like turning into like a frog or something with like a whole different like sexual reproduction phase. So I was talking with Daniel Winkler about it, and he was telling me that the Ophiocordyceps sinensis will actually turn into an endophytic fungus, and it will live. Everybody know what endophytic fungus are? Raise your hands if you don't. All right. So endophytic fungi. Endo means inside. Phytic means plant. So some fungus live inside of leaves and like bark and like things like that inside of the plants. And the Ophiocordyceps sinensis will turn into an endophytic fungus that lives inside of the plant that the caterpillar eats, that it grows off of. So it might be one of the ways that it comes into contact with its host. And from the research around the world actually shows that Cordyceps militaris will morph into Simplacillum and Lecanicillum, which are both soil molds, and most of their hosts bury themselves underground before they, for their pupa stage. So the larvae will bury themselves underground, turn into a pupa, and then emerge as a moth or whatever. So I believe that's might be one of the times that the fungus actually comes in contact with them. So super wild stuff there. And those are just pictures of Canidiogenesis, of the canidia actually being formed on the mold, the moldy cordyceps.
So the organism actually changes its entire genome into a whole other organism?
Totally.
And can go back again?
Yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, craziest thing ever. We got a lot to learn. Oh, yeah. So these are Parenthecium under the microscope. So Michael's actually the one that educated me last weekend that these are the actual fruit bodies of the mushroom. So a lot of times when I'm starting new cultures, do you have a question or no?
No,
yeah.
Sorry.
So a lot of times when I'm starting new cultures, I'll scrape the Parenthecium off because they'll just pop right off of the stromata. I'll scrape them off with a little scalpel and I'll wipe them on a petri dish. But the one thing that can happen when you do this is you might actually get a clone. But a lot of times the spores will just like explode out of there, and like you'll get like a lot of different multispore cultures. But if you're going to start cultures from the Parenthecium, just know that you are going to be getting multispore cultures, like inbred multispore cultures in mass. So as far as like cultivation goes, you want the smallest amount of spores that you can get, because that means less genetic variation. You want to have like a pretty solid genetic strain whenever you're working for commercial purposes. Or else you'll get like a bunch of cordyceps that are like different sizes and shapes and stuff in one culture. So I was telling you guys, cordyceps spores are straight. So the ascospores from the cordyceps, this is what they look like. It looks like shards of glass or like selenite or something. So we got these pictures at Fungi for the People. I taught a cordyceps class there earlier this year in Oregon. So Jay's out here, he's a super cool guy. You should definitely link up with him if you haven't. But we got to see the spores under the microscope, which was really awesome. Yeah, this is what it looks like when the spores germinate out of the Parenthecium. So as I said before, you could still get clones from this, but a lot of times the spores will just start new genetics.
Can I ask real quick? So how would you make sure you're not getting like spores? Like, would you take it from the stromata then, or how would you?
So what I do to make sure that I get, because it's really hard to not get multispores. Like you need to be like super attentive and have a microscope. So what I do is I worked for Trad for a week. I don't know if you guys know Trad Cotter, Mushroom Mountain. But I worked with him for a week, and he taught me to stick small mushrooms to the top of a petri dish with Vaseline or super glue. So I started doing that with the cordyceps. So I'll make the petri dish, and I'll stick the cordyceps to the top of the petri dish, and I'll leave it there for a couple hours, and it'll drop spores on there. It'll only drop a little bit, but if you leave it there overnight, then you'll get like a full spore print, and there'll be like thousands of spores on there. So if you just do it for a couple hours, you only get like a couple spores. And then this is Cordyceps, so this is what it looks like whenever the spores are getting it on. And then you can isolate like this is like a small culture, so you can just isolate that out. But it's really hard. Like after doing it so long, if I look at the plate, I can tell where to put it underneath the microscope because I can see little shit in there. Well, some people can't. Like I'll be like, hey, can you see this? And like a lot of people just
20 years.
can't see it. But like I don't know, maybe I'll need glasses eventually. But I really like that I can see that. But yeah, one of my little things I like to say is that mushrooms do their love making like on the ground or like on a log in forests and stuff like that. And I think that's way cooler than a dark room. We have a lot to learn from fungus. So here's another picture from the 1800s where when Cordyceps was classified as Clavaria militaris instead of Cordyceps militaris. So if you look that up on Google, you'll find some really cool old pictures. And the one thing I really like about this picture here is that you see a lot of genetic variation. So we have this really tall one, we have ones with like little club heads and like just like twisty ones. Like sometimes I'll get like super spiral Cordyceps that looks like a cheese curl or something. And the other thing I really like about this picture is it shows three different species of pupae and 3 different species of caterpillars that the Cordyceps militaris is growing on. So whoever drew this picture found Cordyceps growing on multiple different insect hosts. This one looks like a cyclops. You see that? It has like the one eyeball thing. Crazy. And it also shows a hollow Cordyceps, which I don't like those for commercial production. Here we have, I fixed it, Mandy. It doesn't have that backwards molecule on it anymore. So yeah, we have cordycepin. Cordycepin is very similar to adenosine triphosphate, which is our body produces for energy on a cellular level. It keeps us alive. We need it. Whenever the was it World War II was with the Nazis? Excuse my history, right? Yeah. So the Nazis were like using some gas that would make you stop producing ATP, and then you just die. So like you need ATP, and it costs our body a lot of energy to produce ATP. Like it takes some of the molecules necessary to make ATP to produce it. So you lose a little bit, you make enough to live. But cordycepin has a very short half-life, but it goes in your body, but it goes directly like into your cells and provides you with energy on a cellular level. And I'm writing this blog in this chapter on my book called Cordyceps the DNA Mushroom because Cordyceps produces nucleobases necessary for DNA synthesis, DNA and RNA synthesis. So it's protective of our DNA, but it can also help us to replicate our DNA. And this is really awesome as well because Cordyceps, Cordyceps is a powerful aphrodisiac. They call it like Himalayan Viagra out east where they find the Tibetan ones. And it's really cool because it works for females and males. Like some aphrodisiacs work only for females and some aphrodisiacs only work for males because we have different parts and stuff, different things that makes us tick. So it works for males and females, and it makes your DNA really strong and healthy, and then it's just like put your DNA into somebody basically and make a new healthy DNA. So like that's really, really cool that it will do that. And then here we have the enzyme Superoxide Dismutase, which all organisms produce, but Cordyceps produces a fair amount of this, and it's a powerful antioxidant. So I'm a firm believer that like mushrooms help us to live better, but also help us to make them live better. So you find these Cordyceps, you're gonna want more if you start to feel the effects from it. It gives you energy, makes you horny, and all that good jazz. I like to relate this with like truffles, because I don't know how many of you guys follow me, but I sell truffles throughout the year. But truffles can induce adult neurogenesis. So it's just like off topic for a little bit. But basically when we're little kids, our brains are making new connections all the time. And like it literally, those new connections that you make as a child, the more connections you have, the more connected your brain actually will be. Like if you have more diverse, creative, and logistical connections as a child, it will make your left and right hemisphere of your brain connect more. So like some people's brains are not connected as much as other people's brains because they get stuck in routines, they do the same thing all over and over again, they don't have new experiences, they live in the same place their whole life, and their brains are not as connected as maybe somebody's like traveling all over the place, going to festivals like this, really artsy stuff, seeing all sorts of cool stuff, playing with technology. So mushrooms like the truffle will help you to induce adult neurogenesis, and that's important because truffles are hard to find. You have to train a whole other organism to find it for you. So I think a lot of the mushrooms are very are pushing us to be able to live better and help them to live better as well. So we're back to the Cordy quest. As I was telling you, when I took that Cordyceps home, I cloned it, and I took 20 separate tissue cultures of this, and only one of those 20 tissue cultures took. And then I sent it out to everybody, and only one person got back to me, Brian Paul Gates. And then as I was cultivating them, I was having a lot of success in the wintertime and not so much success in the summertime, and I thought that they would grow better in warm climates because they were being grown in southern Asia. So whenever I stopped getting successes in the summertime, I kind of just like took all my Cordyceps jars and put them in a box in the basement and forgot about it because I was busy prepping for my second annual mushroom festival. And the day after the second annual mushroom festival, Alex Dorr, who's around here somewhere, he came over to my house because I wanted to show him my mushroom, because I was growing algae in mushrooms in a closed environment and doing gas exchange with it. So like I had reishi, and like reishi will grow real long and stuff if you don't have enough oxygen. So I kept them in a closed environment with bioreactors, algae bioreactors, and the algae was consuming the CO2 and producing oxygen for the mushrooms, which was really cool. So I was showing him that, and then he was wandering around my basement, and he's like, yo, what's this? And he pulls a Cordyceps in the box, and it was growing, and I was like, oh my god. So like there's been so many chances where like this might not have happened. Like there's like, out of all, like I've got like 20 different specimens of Cordyceps that people sent to me from around the country. Maybe like 5 of those will actually produce mushrooms. Like a lot of them just won't fruit again in culture. So like the one that we got fruited, like after I sent it out a couple weeks later, Ryan sent me this picture of it growing on agar in a jar, so we knew that it could fruit. And then when I almost gave up, Alex found the one in my basement, and it kept going. So after that year is whenever I started to realize that they were growing in the wintertime, and they stopped growing when it got hot outside. And then I realized, oh, it was in the basement, and that's why it grew, because it was colder in the basement. So we fruit our Cordyceps at 65 degrees in my warehouse. All my pictures are not there. Oh well. The Thai word for Cordyceps is right here. If you put it in Google Translate, it comes out as gold tank lease or gold tank rental, which is weird. I don't know why, because the direct translation is more like insect grass or mushroom grass or something like that. Here's another picture, or the first picture from Thailand. This is my other picture from there. Hopefully my other pictures are there, but those are Cordyceps growing out of hard-boiled eggs. So I tested this out. The mycelium grew in the eggs, but no mushrooms came out of the eggs, and then I had really stinky eggs. But I definitely want to try this again. Cordyceps mushrooms, they require a lot of nutrients. As we know, bugs are super nutritious. I mean, some of us may know bugs are very nutritious. A lot of people are looking at them as alternative protein sources, which I think I don't think we should like. I don't know. I have my own opinions. Like a lot of people think one thing's going to save the world. Like if we all eat bugs instead of meat, it'll save the world. Or if we all like eat mushrooms instead of meat, it'll save the world. I think it's a combination of a lot of things. But a lot of people are really getting on that bug wave. But they're very nutritious is the point. So they really like a lot of nutrients. Like they'll like a lot of protein and stuff like that. So I really try and make my recipe with all things that people will eat. So we're not doing peptone or anything like that. We do like nutritional yeast for protein because they use that protein as a nitrogenous base. They break that down to create some of the compounds that they produce. We'll use vegan meal replacement, organic, non-GMO, everything. But we'll do the vegan meal replacement for like the micronutrients. We do a little bit of azomite and brown rice and a little bit of gypsum and water and starch. They really like starch. So we'll do tapioca flour. And I just try and keep everything organic, non-GMO, no cane sugar, gluten-free with the rice and all that kind of stuff. Just to make it more accessible, because a lot of people want to use it as a medicine. So we want to make it available to all the people that actually like maybe using it holistically or therapeutically. So whenever I start cultivation, I already showed you the petri dish. I'll go from the petri dish to a liquid culture. The liquid culture I then spread out. Whenever I'm doing test runs, just like I said, sometimes the Cordyceps won't fruit. So for the ones that don't fruit, I like to make my liquid culture recipe with something that I'll actually consume, so that you can actually drink the mycelium afterwards. If it doesn't fruit, it still has medicinal benefits in the mycelium. And in the liquid, there's metabolites, enzymes, and acids that were produced. So you don't really want to throw away the liquid, but if you do, you can just extract the mycelium and then eat that, or like powder it or something. It's not that much weight, especially if you dry it. So you can get nice blobs of, like nice scobies of Cordyceps.
Dehydrated over fruit or something.
What?
Dehydrated over fruit or something?
Yeah.
Little, like cracker?
Yeah, a little doodah.
Do you cook it at all, or do you consume it raw?
Cook what?
The liquid culture.
Oh, I'll consume it raw, but like as far as mycelium goes, you definitely want to like when you're working with like the cordyceps, like the bottom part, the tempeh, delicious stuff. You definitely want to cook that and make it more bioavailable. But as far as the liquid cultures go, there's just a lot of beneficial compounds in the actual liquid that you don't want to like heat up really. I teach a lot in inner cities. I teach in Atlanta and Baltimore, and in New York occasionally. And I want to make these techniques more available for people that live in low socioeconomic areas, might not have as much access to equipment. So how many of you guys are familiar with the PF tech? Cool, I like you guys. I started doing PF Tech with biochar instead of vermiculite because vermiculite's mined and you can make biochar in your backyard. And the only step that's different is that biochar can have a high pH, so you want to just lower the pH by pouring water over it. So I don't really like add a specific measurement of water. I just rinse the biochar, and then when it's wet, I add the equal amount of brown rice flour and mix that up and then put it in containers. And then you don't need a pressure cooker for this to work. You can just put it in a big old soup stock pot. You guys know PF Tech. I don't need to tell you how to do it. But you can grow cordyceps on these cakes. You just can't eat the mycelium. I mean, like if you want to crunch on some biochar, but I wouldn't eat the mycelium from that. But you can actually grow the mushrooms like that. So when I first started, I was doing small batches. I was doing about 100 jars a week. I got a lot of these jars from an old Asian restaurant I worked at, which Cordyceps freed me from this nonsense. Yeah, so I was able to like escape working crappy server jobs and stuff like that. Because just like I said, I dropped out of high school. I had a GED. I'm brown. There was not much opportunity for me at the current state that I was living in. So I really appreciate communities like this. I appreciate the mushrooms for being able to help me create a life that I enjoy and that I find ethical. So yeah, I was doing small batches at first, utilizing recycled. I brought up the Asian restaurant because I was stealing their pad thai bottles. Well, I wasn't stealing them. They were throwing them away. So they would just get like pallets of pad thai jars, and they would scoop out all the pad thai sauce, and then they would throw these away. So I just would take them at the end of the night and rinse them out in the dishwasher and take them home. And I also stole. I didn't steal. I also took a bunch of like soy sauce buckets. They would throw away 5-gallon soy sauce buckets all the time, and I would fruit oyster mushrooms out of it. I actually grew mushrooms in there because they would have oyster mushrooms, and they would just let them get too old, and they would still serve them to people. And I just would take the mushrooms and rip them up and roll them up in the cardboard. And I taught this Mexican dude back there how to grow mushrooms because he wanted to go to Mexico and start a restaurant. So we just had lots of fun and grew mushrooms in the back of the restaurant without the management there. It's always better with friends. So this was back in one of my 3-day classes where I had just students helping me to do the whole prep. We have to make the broth. Somebody has to put grains in the jar. Somebody has to pour the broth in. Somebody close it up and put it in the pressure cooker. Now I run 220 jars a day, as where I was only running 100 jars a week. So it's definitely better with friends when you're doing so many jars every day. And the reason I use wide mouth pint jars because I get consistent yields with those. I've tried bags, I've tried trays. Whenever you get to bigger containers, you run into a lot of issues with bacteria on the bottom of the cakes. You really have to fine tune the liquid to I say use rice because it's brown rice specifically because it's been shown to help increase the levels of cordycepin and other beneficial compounds versus other grains. So I'll do, I got this spoon from the dollar store. It's like a ladle, and it's slightly over 2 tablespoons, which is perfect. So you do a little bit more rice, and then if I was I used to tell people do 2 tablespoons of rice and a 1/4 cup of liquid broth because a 1/4 cup is 4 tablespoons. But you want to do just a little bit more rice, or else the bottom will be wet and you'll get bacteria on the bottom, and you can't use the bottom. So it's just a little tricky fine tuning. But when you're doing bigger ones, you run a lot of risk of just wasting your mycelium because it's still beneficial at the end after you harvest your mushrooms. The cake is edible. You can powder it. You can mix it into different products. But if it's covered in bacteria, you don't want to use that because it's gross. So here we have some more pictures from Thailand. This is a Thai Cordyceps farm. You can see all these shelves. They have lights on each shelf. They have 2 stacks of jars on each shelf. And it's central air, which you might not be able to see because it's kind of weird and blurry. But this one blows my mind every time because they're growing them outside. But the one thing to note on that picture of the one... Sorry, I've been watching my kids still, kind of. I was trying to make sure it wasn't him. But you put plastic on the top because they're really photosensitive. So we have our lights coming in at an angle, and if we don't turn the cordyceps jars, they'll typically just grow straight towards the light. So you want them to grow up so they'll be nice and pretty and tall. But that one blows my mind because they're growing them outside, and I don't know how because it's hot outside. So these were my first grow ups. It was in a closet in my house. You can see just all the cordyceps stacked up. I had lights like this, in the middle, fluorescent T5s. I used fluorescent T5s in combination with blue and red LEDs, which the blue and red LEDs have been shown to help the cordyceps produce more compounds. This is like similar with plants and other mushrooms, is that mushrooms and plants will produce oils and pigments to protect themselves from specific light frequencies, or light, is light frequency, is a spectrum? Or is it both same thing? All right, cool. So to protect themselves from specific light, they'll produce pigments and oils, and we can use those, they're beneficial. So you can see here that I have like trays and jars and different sized jars. I was doing a lot of testing at the beginning as I was writing my book and all that kind of stuff to give you guys the best information that I possibly could. So you can see here is just an example of the blue and red LEDs, which I tried to fruit them out with blue and red LEDs just by themselves, and the one thing I didn't bring into account is that in my first grow, they were getting indirect sunlight, and then I tried to do it in a completely dark room with just the blue and red LEDs, and it took way too long to pin, and which sucked. They really need a lot of light to pin. So like whenever you inoculate them and you're incubating them, you want to keep them in complete darkness, because if you get them in the light and they're not fully grown on their substrate, they'll stop growing on the substrate and they'll try and fruit off the little patch that they've grown on. So you want to let it grow out full, and it'll stay completely white when it's in the dark. But when it fully colonizes the substrate, yellow pigments will start to produce on the mycelium. And then, question?
I was just gonna say, I feel like the light starts making them have a skin on them.
Yeah.
Like the UV makes them like react and the cells differentiate, and they want to like.
Totally. Yeah, like as soon as you expose them to light, the yellow turns orange within a day. Like mycelium will turn almost completely orange, and then like within like a week, you'll start to see pins start to come out at the top.
Did you mess around with like the locations of the LEDs?
Yeah, they're on the top, on the side, around. We might start like dipping the bottom of our jars in paint or something, because they'll fruit on the bottom a lot. Like they'll fruit on if light's hitting it all over, they'll fruit everywhere. So they fruit all over themselves. So here's just a picture of like one of our really good strains back in the day. I don't know how many of you guys have been following it, but this was my PMA4 strain, which was the first like commercial strain that I was offering. And this is one of my pride and joy pictures. It's just like a really, really nice fruiting of cordyceps. The substrate didn't need to be this big, but if you want to just like grow it to eat the substrate, which is delicious, then you can grow more of it. But one of the reasons why I love this picture so much is because if you search Cordyceps militaris on Google, it's one of the first three pictures that comes up on the wiki. And if you click it, it takes you to my website, which is awesome. So yeah, really nice fruiting with trays. I will do trays, but small trays, because the bigger you go, the more chance you risk. Even if it's not wet on the bottom, the bigger the mass of substrate is, the more opportunity there is for bacteria and stuff to grow. So you can still get good yields. It's just a matter of like being able to sterilize or pasteurize that much material. So I like to use bread pans with like a pan liner in it. So yeah, more sexy cordyceps pictures with the paramecium really exposed. So one of the things I didn't know when I first started growing cordyceps is when to harvest them, and I was harvesting them early. You want the cordyceps to grow, like typically they'll reach the top of a pint jar. Sorry, water. And you want the paramecium to stand out. Like when the paramecium are erect is whenever it's time to pull them. Like they'll like straight just like stick out and look like little cordyceps growing off the cordyceps. So they'll get really nice and plump. So again, back in the day I wasn't harvesting them. I was harvesting them too early. You can see that they're not reaching the top of the jar yet. But this was like during strain development when I was picking out the best strains. So that's when I picked out the PMA4, because at maximum we were getting like 5 grams per pint jar dry, which is great because we sell grams for $5. So it's like about $25 value per jar, which we sell jars for $25. But you also get the cake at the bottom too, which you can utilize and eat and all that good jazz. So yeah, that's what you want. You want between 3 to 5 grams dry for commercial production. That's if you're getting less than that, then you need a better strain. Michael Weiss had the best strain of 2018 right now, right? Yeah.
2017 it came out.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been going for the past year.
He had the best strain of the past year. It's the 003 strain, which just started to like slow down on us like a couple months ago. But that thing produced mad yield. I'll show you guys pictures of it. So here we have more pictures of my PMA strains. The PMA just stands for Paramecium multiascospore. Really, really great fruiting bodies. Pretty Cheetos. And here you can see the Parathecium standing out. Looks like a little coral on it. This is like prime time for harvesting when the Parathecium are standing up like that. The other thing, whenever you're growing Cordyceps in cultivation, you get the opportunity to experience more genetic expression because it's not getting rained on. There's wind not blowing all over it. I'm sorry, I'm sitting down. There's wind not blowing all over it. It's not getting rained on, so it can like express itself more. So we'll see like these praying hands, or like these hands that are like opening up. Like this one is just one vase that has like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stromata on it. Super gnarly. Gnarliceps. So really, really pretty stuff that you get to see. And also in this picture, it's cool to note that they fruited so hard that it shrunk up the substrate. Like a lot of times, that's another thing to note is like if the substrate starts pulling away from the sides of the jar or the sides of the tray, it's putting like most of its energy into Cordyceps. And I'll talk about. I was getting ahead of myself. I'll talk about that in another slide. So yeah, Cordyceps hit Manhattan. I took these to this really like bougie apartment in Astor's place in Manhattan. Like super huge freaking apartment. Like to be in that place and have a huge apartment like that, you gotta be making money. And like those people like were having this like they were having an entomophagy party. There's like, oh, insects are cool. We're gonna have a bunch of friends over and eat bugs. And they had this gourmet chef come and like cook bugs and stuff. And they made like mushroom tarts with like 1 Cordyceps on it. And I thought it was so cool because like I do believe that they have like a gourmet aspect about them, similar to like truffles, because they are kind of an expensive mushroom. Just like have that experience of having a Cordyceps on your plate. Like even just a couple Cordyceps. Like some people that look like, we have a couple friends that get lucky and maybe find like 30 or 50 Cordyceps in a year, like out hunting wild. And if you try that, that's probably like half of an ounce of Cordyceps. So to be able to have this amount of Cordyceps is like, it's like the first time it's happened in North America, besides like if you're getting like Asian Cordyceps or something. So it's like very, very rare to like, so like to be able to just have like a couple Cordyceps on your plate. Like back in the day when I first was getting them from Michael and learning about it, he was just like, yeah, I'll find them in the forest and eat them. And if you just eat 1 Cordyceps, you can feel the effects of it. What was it? Distractions are good. Yeah, so you can feel the effects from just a couple Cordyceps. You're supposed to, recommended dosage that I actually got from Thailand is 1 gram a day, and then 2 to 3 grams a day for people that are actually being treated for something, which in Thailand, they're treating people of AIDS and HIV with Cordyceps as an adjunct therapy to whatever they're taking in the hospitals. So 2 to 3 grams for somebody that has like AIDS, which has also been shown to be beneficial for other STIs, I think is the correct term for those nowadays. So yeah, a lot of people gave me shit for this picture. They're like, oh, you're going to be the reason that like Cordyceps infect humans, and like, you're going to like wipe out bug populations in New York City. And I'm just like, you can't find that many Cordyceps in the wild. They're not killing every insect. Like, they're very selective. But yeah, people don't know. Everybody's like, oh, The Last of Us, like you're going to turn into zombies. So yeah, whenever I was growing small scale, I would just dry them out on top of racks with paper towels, and they would dry in like 12 to 24 hours. Now I just have so much at a time that I have to put them in dehydrators, and I really like the dehydrators that have a fan that push from the back versus the ones that push down, because the ones that push down, all the Cordyceps on the bottom, when you have so much, they won't dry as fast. So yeah, you just dry them up, put them in a jar, put a little silica packet in there. I have ounces in, I'll just pull them out real quick. Excuse me. Yeah, I have dry ounces that I package and put silica packets, and then I seal them. And I have those available if anybody's interested. Shameless plugs. That's what I do this for. So yeah, I've been teaching classes about Cordyceps for the past 2 years, and this is actually the grow room of one of the people that are one of the groups that took my first Cordyceps class that I offered at my farm. So they actually bought an elementary school in somewhere out here, some like random like middle of nowhere place out here in New York. I can't even remember, like something with an Oneonta or something. Yeah, near there, like out in the boonies, there's this elementary school that somebody built because they had a bunch of money, but there's not enough people that live there for kids to go to school there. So these Chinese folks came in, and there's this program that if they provide jobs for people, then they can get visas to come in here. So they like made this American ginseng farm, like with pH like farm, and they work with a lot of ginseng growers and ship a bunch of product to China. But they started growing cordyceps after they took my cordyceps course. The one thing, there's a couple things. They started taking information from other people, but you can do whatever you want. But I taught it, and I knew what I was telling you guys. But they put a heater in their cordyceps room, and you see there's no fruits in there. But also, these are really far apart from each other. Like you could have a whole other stack of cordyceps in there if you made better use of the space. But either way, like they did have some cordyceps fruiting. I was able to consult them because they were wondering why their cordyceps weren't growing, so they had me out to teach again, and I helped them figure it out. But it's really cool to see my students succeeding and people that have learned from me succeeding in growing cordyceps mushrooms. So this is what my farm looks like right now. We have reflective material on the wall. I have a big old warehouse. If anybody sees me on like Instagram or Facebook, I have a big old warehouse. I have a different room for like substrate preparation and like hanging out and playing video games and stuff. And then I have a giant walk-in refrigerator or walk-in cooler because this place used to be used to like store wine and like farmers market goods and stuff. The big walk-in cooler has a R value of 100, and the back end of it, the back side of the building is underground. So like it's built into a hill, so it retains its temperature really good. So I just run one portable AC in there, and it keeps the whole room 65 degrees. And the fruiting room is like a little bit bigger than this whole tent is. So I'm only using a portion of it right now. So I have reflective material, I have the lights coming in around the sides, and you can see that there's like I'm using the most out of these racks. Like you can buy these racks and then buy extra racks for them. But I found out with these metal racks like this, we buy them at like Lowe's or Home Depot, and it's cheaper to buy a whole new shelf and use the shelves from it than to actually buy the individual shelves. Like they sell the shelves separately, like this do you know what I'm saying? Like they sell this part separately than the whole rack. But if you buy a whole nother rack and just use the shelves that comes with it, it's way cheaper than just buying them by itself. So that's what we did, and built them out like that. And my other picture's gone, which shows another angle from it. But here's some mature cordyceps from the farm. That's Michael's 003 strain that grew out perfect and pretty, and it filled out the whole jar, and it was like super awesome. And I have a lot of babies from that, like a lot of like spawn that started from that. Here's what harvest was looking like earlier this year. So like I would just sit down, and like sometimes I'll have somebody help me, and we just like pop the cordyceps jars out, harvest a bunch of them, keep the cakes, dry the cakes, or eat the cakes, and then that's why you need more dehydrating space, because there's just like so much freaking cordyceps. But yeah, beautiful, beautiful stuff. This is the most premium, one of the most premium, like there was way more than this, but this is one of the most premium harvests that I've ever had with Michael's 003 strain. And that picture on the left is my most liked picture on Instagram ever. Which is cool. But that's like the bee's knees right there. That's like, that makes me like, whew, you know? Yeah, that's like the cream of the crop. So yeah, that's what our dehydrator looks like. We have one of those dehydrators that pushes in air from the back. We put aluminum foil over the rack so that the cordyceps don't fall down when they're dehydrating. And then that's what it looks like when it's dry. And then I can take cool pictures when I have pounds of cordyceps. Because not only is it like fun for me, but just like I said, I teach in a lot of low socioeconomic areas, and although I've had the opportunity to live in a lot of different, very developed cities and go to private schools and things like that, I did spend a lot of my time in public schools with people that like didn't have as good of an upbringing, didn't have as good of an education, didn't know if there's going to be food on the table, didn't know where one of their parents is half the time, and like grew up with this different mentality. And I mean, that's a lot of the people I know, and a lot of them are very into popular culture and things of that nature. So I mean, everything from the way that I dress to the way that I manage my social media accounts is to help appeal. Not one, it's really fun for me, but two, it's to help appeal to people that I've worked with and that I continue to work with, because they'll see like pictures of people just posting pounds of weed like this, and like they're like, oh, that's cool, like they're making money, you know, they're successful if they have all that weed. And I'm posting like bags like this in a similar fashion. Like I'll post pictures of me like weighing out cordyceps on a little scale and like bagging it up, and like just like hashtag like moving dimes or like whatever, you know what I mean? And like people are like, oh, this is cool, and like then they see the price and they're like, wow, or like then they'll see like some of the clothes that I'm wearing and they're like, oh, this guy is doing well for himself because of this kind of stuff. And like I've got such incredible reactions from that. Like I've had people, like even just last year at my festival, I had people that you like would never have been interested in mushrooms otherwise, like come out and like be exposed to like new realities, which is very important for that brain development, like I was telling you guys. So fun for me, and then it's also like a I don't know, kind of like a social experiment that's been working very, very well for me. Especially when I go like down to Atlanta, like I straight up taught. I couldn't teach Cordyceps when I went. Like I straight up went to the hood in Atlanta that is like urban farm, and like I couldn't teach Cordyceps there because they didn't know anything about mushrooms. Like one of the people from that class sent me a picture. Like I do like I'll get people to grow oyster mushrooms on shredded newspaper, like newspaper pulp. And one of the people sent me a picture like, oh, I'm about to cook this up. I got this mushrooms growing, and it was just the substrate. Like it was just mycelium on paper. Like they were about to eat it. So like a lot of people just didn't know, but like we're able to relate a lot because of my ability to communicate with people like that and understand like that level of reality. So yeah, super important. But yeah, here we have the Cordyceps, patent pending. But yeah, it's really awesome just to fry up the cakes. It kind of is like a vegan sausage patty. It tastes very similar. Put a little salt, a little pepper. Super delicious, and we cook this up so many different ways. This is what the Cordyceps mycelium powder looks like. So basically, it's fermented flour. Let's see what the time is like. Oh, I should be finishing up here soon. I don't know how much time I have, but does anybody know how much time when this is supposed to end? Sweet. All right, I'm just gonna rush through this. But yeah, this is fermented Cordyceps flour. This is what I call it, fermented flour. It's just like rice flour, except it's fermented by Cordyceps mushrooms. And you can, if you mix it with like a different type of flour, maybe like tapioca flour, you can utilize it like for baking, and like we made pizza crust and stuff like that with it. On the left we have a Mycelium Extract of Cordyceps. On the right we have a concentrated extract, which I think concentrated extracts are going to be more beneficial for people that are trying to use it as a therapy. It's like just take as much as your body can handle, and just like get super like infused with the mushroom. So basically that's just like a tincture without the solvent in it. You take away the alcohol. This is a fruit body extract. You can see it's very, very dark. As soon as you pour alcohol on the Cordyceps mushrooms, it turns completely orange. I have organic tinctures and non-organic tinctures over at my booth that we made with our mushrooms. Another shameless plug, this company sponsored me. They make closed loop extraction systems for the cannabis industry, and I found a lot of correlations between cannabis and mushrooms, as I was involved with that industry prior to mushrooms. But you can utilize systems like this, and I'll show a better one that's more so for ethanol, for recollecting your solvents and making concentrated extracts of mushrooms. And on the right we have a fractional distillation unit. So this goes with what I was saying about getting mass spectrometry equipment, gas and liquid chromatography and mass spectrometry, because you need a standard, and standards are typically expensive if you want to buy pure cordycepin, because when you run an analysis, you get a graph and like you have to be able to have a standard that you can tell what the graph means. So like you have to run pure cordycepin through the machine and see what it looks like, and then you can see like what levels of cordycepin that you have in your mushrooms. So it's fractional distillation. It heats up at different temperatures.